Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something deeply personal, our identity.
hmm
Forget all those labels the world might use. We're exploring this powerful idea that actually your truest identity, it's already defined, not by your situation, but by a divine invitation.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're drawing from the Faith Beams GP podcast,
Right.
specifically part 1 of their series on 2 Chronicles 7.13, The Healing Journey. Today, our focus is squarely on discovering divine identity, called by his name.
Called by his name.
Yes. And, the source material really emphasizes, starting from a place of peace, of connection, we want to carry that same sort of reflective feel today.
Okay, great. Let's unpack this then. So the foundational verse we're looking at is 2 Chronicles 7.14. It
Wow.
starts, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways." And then comes the promise, "Then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land."
Right. And the insight the source really pulls out isn't just the promise at the end, but that very first part. If my people who are called by my name.
That specific phrase.
Yes, it's framed not just as some old rule, but as, well, a personal, intentional, really loving invitation from God. It's directed, purposeful.
And what strikes me is how universal this is meant to be. The material makes it so clear this isn't like geographically locked.
Not at all.
It mentions a business owner in Lagos, maybe a stay-at-home mom in Ohio, a teenager in Mumbai, a student in London.
Yeah.
It just cuts across everything. It suggests God is talking to you right now, wherever you are.
And really feel the weight of that invitation. It helps to look back. The source reminds us this was first spoken to King Solomon.
Okay, context.
Yeah, context is key. It's the dedication of the first temple in Jerusalem. So at that specific time, God's people, that meant the Israelites.
Descendants of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob.
Precisely. This nation, with this incredible, miraculous history, rescued from Egypt, the law through Moses, the promised land, and now this amazing temple.
Wow.
So for them, hearing this verse, it was a huge covenant reminder, a relationship reminder. Honestly, a love reminder right there in that sacred moment.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Transformative, even. The source highlights this massive shift.
Mm-hmm.
Because of Jesus Christ, that invitation, which seemed initially focused on one lineage, is now just thrown open to the whole world.
Absolutely. That's the core of it. Galatians 3.29 spells it out so clearly. If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise.
Heirs according to the promise.
Yeah. And the crucial thing here isn't just that the promise gets, bigger.
Mm-hmm.
It fundamentally changes how you belong. It shifts from bloodline to faith.
So it redefines God's people.
Completely. It becomes this inclusive, global, faith-filled family. Doesn't matter if you grew up in the church or just figuring things out today, you're part of it.
Which naturally leads to that big personal question, who am I in God's eyes? Because, let's face it, the world gives us so many labels, right?
Oh, constant.
Student, employee, unemployed, single parent, retired, young, old, all these things. But the source suggests God has this unique, unshakable declaration over you, totally separate from any of that.
And what's fascinating here is how Isaiah 43 verse 1 backs this up, says, "Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine."
You are mine. That's powerful.
It is. It's not just a general blessing. It's this deep personal claim. Ownership almost, intimate knowledge. The profound insight is that your identity isn't something you earn or lose, based on how well you do or what people think.
Right.
It's something you receive from God, based on his character, which doesn't change.
And the material really digs into that, listing these amazing affirmations God speaks over you. Things like chosen, redeemed, loved, accepted.
Yes, and crucially, not forgotten, not
Yeah.
rejected, not abandoned, not invisible.
Wow. It all kind of boils down to redefining your worth, doesn't it? Saying you inherently belong, you're inherently valuable.
Exactly. And the source suggests that really internalizing that simple but huge statement, "I am his," that's where the transformation happens. It even mentions a guided reflection, like an identity meditation, focusing on these truths.
Okay, so once we kind of grasp this incredible truth, this identity in God's eyes, the next step is seeing how it plays out, right? How it actually impacts people's lives. Let's look at some of those real-world examples the source highlights. They're quite powerful.
They really are. They show this isn't just theory. So there's a story of a mother from Kenya. She was struggling, feeling unnoticed.
I think many can relate to that.
Right. But through this understanding of being God's people, she realized his eyes were on her family. Then a business owner in the U.S., he used to think, God only really called pastors or missionaries.
A common thought, maybe?
Very common. But he came to see that, no, entrepreneurs like him, they're absolutely part of his people, too. And that changed how he approached his work.
Interesting. What else?
There's a teenage girl in India. She was being bullied because of her faith, but finding strength in knowing she wasn't alone, she was called by his name.
Yeah.
That made a huge difference.
Yeah, that connection.
And a retired grandfather in the UK. He kind of felt like his purpose was over after retirement.
Yeah.
But he realized, no, he was still his, still called, still loved, still part of it. And one more, a family in Brazil, reading this verse together at dinner.
2 Chronicles 7.1 Fen.
Yes. They were so moved by understanding their collective identity as God's people that they started praying together every night.
These stories really hit home, don't they? It's not abstract theology, it's lived experience.
Exactly.
And for you listening, the point is your story matters too. This divine identity isn't just for them, it's for everyone. It changes lives.
And the source material then naturally moves into what it calls worship and soaking time, which sounds lovely.
It does. What does that involve?
Well, it's described as more than just background music. It's a dedicated time, peaceful instrumental music, really designed for intentional spiritual formation.
Okay.
An invitation to pray, maybe journal, just sit quietly and reflect, or simply listen. Creating space for a real moment with God to let these identity truths sink in.
That sounds like a valuable practice. And building on that quiet reflection, it then guides into something called an interactive scripture study.
Yes, and they do this really interesting word-by-word breakdown of that key phrase. If my people, who are called by my name.
Oh, breaking it down piece by piece.
Exactly, to find the deeper nuances. So for if, it highlights choice, free will. It's an invitation, not forced.
Yeah.
Your decision.
Okay. If implies choice.
Then my people. This emphasizes community. You're not just an isolated individual. You're part of a family.
Right. Not alone.
Who are called. This suggests purpose. It's not random. It's an appointment, a specific summons from God.
Appointed?
And finally, by my name. This points to belonging, authority, holiness, power. God's name carries immense weight.
Wow.
So putting it all together, the source describes this phrase as God's identity statement over you. It really invites you to reflect deeply on what each part means for your life.
That breakdown adds so much depth. And from that personal understanding, the material then broadens the view again, doesn't it, to a global prayer focus.
It does. It becomes this call for collective prayer, for intercession.
For who specifically?
For families, for nations, very importantly for the next generation, kids and teens, for the global church, and especially for those who are really struggling with identity confusion right now.
And there's a collective declaration.
Yes, encouraging people to pray together. We are your people, God.
Yeah.
Called by your name. Recognizing that shared identity in prayer.
Powerful.
And following that collective focus, it moves into something called prophetic encouragement and listener activation. This seems very direct. It specifically addresses those common feelings lots of us have. Feeling unseen, maybe unqualified, too broken, thinking you're too far gone.
Yeah, those internal struggles.
Exactly. And it strongly reiterates God's direct message, cutting through all that doubt. I have called you by name. You are mine. The insight is that these aren't just, nice words. They're fundamental truths meant to completely reframe how you see yourself.
And to help make that real, the source encourages actually speaking it out.
Yes, a specific, potent declaration. I choose to live as God's called one. I receive my divine identity. I walk as his ambassador. Today marks a new beginning.
Saying it aloud.
Yeah, the suggestion is there's real power in actively voicing these truths, choosing to step fully into this identity God gives you.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive for today, what's the main takeaway?
I think the core truth we've really explored is this. You are not forgotten. You're not invisible. You are God's chosen, seen, known, and specifically called by his name.
So, thinking about that, what does this all mean for you listening right now? Here's something to maybe mull over. If you really started to live each day from this deep understanding, this reality of being called by his name, how might that radically change things? Your perspective on problems, how you treat people, your overall impact on the world around you.
Yeah.
Just how might it shift things?
That's a great question to sit with. And remember, this was only part 1 of the Healing Journey series from the source material.
Right, there's more.
Absolutely. Our next deep dive continues with episode 2, which is titled Humble Yourself and Pray Unlocking Breakthrough Through Surrender.
Okay, so humility and prayer.
Exactly. It builds directly on this foundation of identity, moving into these crucial active steps needed for healing and genuine transformation.
Sound like a vital next step. So if this deep dive resonated with you, please make sure you subscribe or follow us wherever you're listening.
Yeah, don't miss the next part.
And maybe share this with someone you know who might be wrestling with identity or feeling a bit distant from God.
That would be great.
We'd also genuinely love to hear your thoughts. You can leave a comment or a review. Let us know how this landed with you. But most importantly, please do come back for the next deep dive. It really is a journey, this 5-part series, and each piece builds on the one before.
It really does.
Yeah.
So until next time, stay in faith, stay in hope, and always, always remember, you are God's beloved. You are called by His name, and you are absolutely part of His healing plan for this world.